to Sunday.
It's hard to explain, okay? But
All day. All year round.
it's so mysterious.
This is who we are.
This is who we are.
WAVR.
WADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar and Bamako, 1 p.m. in Abuja. Many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting 94.9 FM and around the world on WADR.org. Welcome to NEWSLINK. But first, here are the major stories. Senegal unveils its citizen sponsorship campaign for at least 75 candidates ahead of the 2024 February presidential elections. Expelled French ambassador to Niger, Sylvain Ite, departs Niamey nearly a month after expulsion by the junta. And Speaker of the Nigerian National Assembly, Tajuddin Abbas, pleased with organized labor to suspend the October 3 indefinite strike.
Embarking on a nationwide strike at this point will only aggravate an already bad situation, and therefore urge the leadership of labor unions to give us the benefit of doubt and suspend any planned strike action while we engage the executive.
Meanwhile, Ghana's meteorological agency warns of heavy rains and flooding in the coming days. Stay with us for details of these stories and more.
Here is Abdullahi Hassan with NEWSLINK.
Many thanks for joining us and a warm welcome to all of our listeners in Gambia, Liberia, and Ghana. Let's begin this edition of the news in Senegal as the citizen sponsorship campaign for the February 2024 presidential election has been launched. The electoral process that opened on Wednesday will last for 2 months. According to the nation's electoral code, this is an obligatory step for presidential candidates to validate their candidacy. The sponsorship campaign is a form of assessment to determine the ability of different candidates to gain the support of voters. Since the start of the presidency race, at least 75 politicians from both the ruling and opposition camps have declared their candidacy. 6 out of this number are former prime ministers, notably Aminata Touré, popularly known as Mimi Touré, and Mohammed bin Abdullah Dionne. In 2019, out of nearly 30 candidacies submitted to the Constitutional Council, only 5 were validated. To join us in the second half of the news as a guest, that is Mamadou Cho, a Senegalese political analyst, joins us with more. And in Côte d'Ivoire, political actors and stakeholders under the aegis of an electoral observatory platform are calling for a review of the electoral process due to the electoral-related incidents recorded during the September 16 senatorial vote and the 20 elections on September 2. The NGO Ob Nouvelle described the concerns registered after the elections as damaging to the nation's electoral journey. Ob Nouvelle, funded by the former prefect of Abidjan, Vincent Torbi-Ire, recommends the implementation of the review to bring about electoral reforms to prevent future crises. Tawfiq Abdel Nasser reports.
In its communication, the NGO recommends the implementation of a review to arrive at possible electoral reforms. The suggestion was derived from shared concerns among stakeholders to avoid future crises because Ivorians must create trust around the electoral process and the institutions, said Ob Nouvelle. As concerns, Ob Nouvelle mentioned criminal electoral labor and accusations which that directly affect agents of the Independent Electoral Commission, such as corruption, collusion, and absenteeism. Other notable errors include candidates' lack of access to public media, blackmail, and restrictions of freedom of expression in certain localities. The NGO adds that participation in elections in Côte d'Ivoire is becoming critical, which highlights the use of vote buy-in and highlighting the use of money by candidates during the campaign. Ransacking of ballot boxes and altercations between opposition are also major concerns. Regarding the electoral dispute, Obenovelle insists that the Electoral Commission, as an independent entity, is therefore accountable for all the dysfunctions observed and those that it might not have anticipated. Recall, Côte d'Ivoire's electoral cycle began in 2020 and climaxed in 2023 with the combined municipal and regional councillors on September 2, 2023 and the senatorial vote on September 16. In all the elections, the ruling RHDP of Alassane Ouattara secured the majority of seats.
Tawfiq Abdenas reporting there. More on electoral matters. The British ambassador to Monrovia, Neil Bradley, says his government is providing financial and logistical support to local civil society organizations to fully observe the upcoming October 10 elections. The intervention is intended to empower the CSOs in Liberia to ensure that the outcome of the polls is credible and reflects the will of the people. WADR's Dalton Popper reports.
Ambassador Neil Brandy said the elections mark a critical point in the history of Liberia. As such, his government is excited to support local civil society organizations. He urged the collaborative of CSOs to maintain a higher level of independence and credibility in performing their tasks.
We're looking forward to working closely with you in the weeks, months and years ahead. And we're entering a very interesting time for Liberia in terms of consolidation of democracy. So really important that we combine the capability to observe the elections on the ground, but also to analyse, interpret and make sense of what is happening and what the lessons are for the future. And that's really where the Dakar Institute can come in with the work that you're doing.
Among the institutions that benefited from the support is the Dakar Institute for Social and Economic Research. The head of the institution, Dr. Ibrahim Yang, appreciated the British government for the support.
So we are very grateful for this support, and we'll continue to engage with the electoral process as we have been doing, providing analytical perspectives to stakeholders who are interested in engaging with this process. And we are having 2 policy dialogues this week. Tomorrow, in-person policy dialogue, trying to understand the role of observers in the process, what credibility or legitimacy they add to the process. And then on Thursday, the 28th, we are having another policy dialogue that is virtual.
Already, dozens of international organizations have arrived in the country ahead of the polls on October 10, 2023. For NEWSLINK on West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Darlington Porqua in Monrovia.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. NEWSLINK continues.
Elsewhere in Niger, France's ambassador left the country early on Wednesday morning, nearly a month after the military government ordered his expulsion. This was confirmed by President Emmanuel Macron's office in a statement. The junta had issued a directive demanding that the French ambassador, Sylvain Ity, leave the country within 48 hours at the end of August in response to what the junta described as France's contrary interest to that of the Nigerian state. France at first ignored the order, sticking to its stance that the military government was illegitimate, while calling for the reinstatement of President Mohamed Bazoum, who was toppled in the July coup. President Emmanuel Macron on Sunday said the diplomat would be pulled out and French troops withdrawn from the Sahelian state. In Burkina Faso, hundreds of supporters of the interim president converged on the popular United Nations roundabout in Ouagadougou for a radical action to protect Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Their convergence at about 8 p.m. on Tuesday followed rumors of an attempted coup against Traoré. Imo Edit tells us more.
Several demonstrations invaded the United Nations roundabout on Tuesday around 8 p.m. following rumors of an attempted putsch against Captain Ibrahim Traoré. But the army labeled the reported signals of the alleged coup as misinformation. The alarm of a possible coup against Captain Traoré had gone viral on social media after supporters of the junta leader cited a heavy security presence at a strategic location. However, an army officer explained that the group of gendarmes at Camp Panga was to relieve their colleagues who were on rotation duty. The headquarters of the Burkinabe National Gendarmerie is located in Pampanga. This gathering, according to the army officer who spoke on the matter, was what the people had misinterpreted. Until Wednesday, demonstrators remained stationed, calling on people to occupy the streets and roundabouts to defend and watch over the government house. With cries of vuvuzela, several demonstrators chant slogans in praise of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, brandishing Burkinabe, Russian, Malian and Nigerian flags. Recently, news about an attempted coup against the junta leader has made rounds, especially on social media platforms.
A more added report in there. We cross over to Nigeria as the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Tajuddin Abbas, has asked the Nigeria Labour Congress (NLC) to hold its plan for a nationwide strike over fuel subsidy removal. The Speaker made the call on Tuesday in his speech at the resumption of plenary after the 8-week holiday. Abbas said the planned strike by the NLC would further aggravate the economic challenges facing the country and pleaded with the leadership of the union to be patient with the government. He assured the NLC that the House would mediate between them and the federal government to fast-track an agreement.
We must deploy the necessary legislative instruments to create jobs, ensure payment of living wages in the civil service, pull Nigerians out of poverty, address the prevailing infrastructural deficit, rid the country of crippling insurgency, ensure the security of lives and property, and affordable functional education so that no child is left behind. The 10th House had assured Nigerians there would be interfacing between the organized labor and the government to quickly work out a realistic new national minimum wage. It is in our considered opinion that embarking on a nationwide strike at this point will only aggravate an already bad situation, and therefore urge the leadership of labor unions to give us the benefit of doubt and suspend any planned strike action while we engage the executive.
The Speaker of the House of Representatives in Nigeria, Tajuddin Abbas, speaking there. Now, the National Assembly members of the Gambia have begun a 2-day forum on budget analysis, review and scrutiny. The Refresher Capacity Building Engagement Forum is organized by the Office of the Clerk in partnership with the EU-Gambia Partnership Office. Our Banjul correspondent, Sankule Janko, has more.
The forum aims to enhance the budget analysis and scrutinize the skills of members of the National Assembly. It focuses on understanding the national budget, scrutinizing its utilization, and ensuring alignment with national policies. Dominic Mendy is the lead trainer of the forum.
What we will be doing is to look at the budget presented to us by government and to be able to understand it. Is the economic growth in the areas in which employment will be provided to the people? Will life be better for the people at the end of the delivery of this budget? And eventually you, as members of the National Assembly, will say, what does this budget mean for my constituency?
There is a need for members of the National Assembly to familiarize themselves with the analytical skills ahead of the budget session in November and December. Explaining the significant roles of deputies during the budget session is the Permanent Secretary for Finance and Economic Affairs of the Gambia, Abdoulaye Jallow.
It is expected that a more effective and efficient budget scrutiny and oversight culture will be entrenched within the National Assembly. That would enhance socio-economic development programming and outcomes for the good of the country.
The Deputy Majority Leader of the National Assembly, Abdoulaye Cisse, is calling on his colleagues to make the best use of the training.
I will therefore encourage all honorable members to make maximum use of this training and engage the lead trainers as much as possible to better our understanding, skills, and techniques on the most effective tool and techniques to employ in budget scrutiny.
The training will hopefully better prepare the National Assembly members for their oversight function ahead of the next budget session, when the Finance Minister will table the budget for scrutiny and parliamentary approval in November. Key among the major features the lawmakers are expected to critically look at in the budget include the provision of economic growth and employment. For NEWSLINK and West Africa Democracy Radio, I am Sankule Janko reporting from Banjul.
You are listening to NewsLink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM, Dakar, Senegal. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Senegal unveils its citizen sponsorship campaign for at least 75 candidates ahead of the 2024 February presidential elections. Expelled French ambassador to Niger, Sylvain Ité, departs Niamey nearly a month after expulsion by the junta. Speaker of the Nigerian National Assembly, Tajuddin Abbas, pleads with organized labor to suspend the October 3 indefinite strike. Still ahead in the news, Ghana's meteorological agency warns of heavy rains and flooding in the coming days. We also have the guest interview and sports update. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Remember, we stream live on wadr.org and on YouTube, WADR News. Lomé, the Togolese capital, is hosting a regional workshop by the World Customs Organization, WCO, on the collection of customs operational practices in the fight against fraud and seizure. The seminar, co-organized by the Togolese Revenue Office, OTR, began on Monday and will end on Friday after days of consultations. Declaring the event opened, Togo's Commissioner of Customs and Indirect Rights, Atakakra Asen, said the gathering aims to highlight operational customs practices on the select team. Francis Boniface completes the story.
According to Commissioner Atakakra Asen, for a long time, customs remained attached to their sovereign mission of collecting revenue. However, faced with the development of international trade, all customs offices around the world were called upon to simplify their procedures and facilitate customs clearance to ensure the free movement of people and goods. Their renewed agenda, Asen warns, risks compromising their customs control ability, hence the training. The sessions will enable participants to address the theme, which constitutes a real scourge of modern times. Theoretical models and practical exercises will be carried out to educate participants on the emerging trend used by smugglers to move illicit goods. The training also takes into account methods of concealment, modern search techniques, effective targeting and examination of high-risk goods, and international best practices. For Asen, the training therefore comes at the right time to improve usual control practices. The WCO hopes that at the end of the workshop, participants will master the models to benefit all of their customs agents who are struggling against custom fraud and organized crimes. Customs executives and security from Togo, Cameroon, Congo, Madagascar, and the Democratic Republic of Congo are in attendance.
Francis Boniface reporting. The Ghana Meteorological Agency has issued a warning to residents of Accra, the capital city, as it anticipates further flooding incidents in the wake of heavy rains leading to major floods. The government agency mandated to offer weather and climate services has warned of more rain until the middle of December. Most cities in Ghana have recorded floods in recent times. From Accra, WADR's Atil Imbila Lawson reports.
The call by the climatological body follows the inundation of parts of Ghana's national capital, Accra, last Friday after almost an hour of rainfall. Several commuters had to walk several miles to get to their destination due to submerged pathways and bridges. Data from the Ghana Meteorological Agency indicates that the capital recorded rainfall during the downpour measured a staggering 78 millimeters, exceeding the usual 50 millimeters recorded, thereby resulting in extensive flooding across the city. Joseph Potofi, head of forecasting at the Ghana Meteorological Agency, says this should be expected across the country.
We are in a minor rainy season, and if you could recollect, we came out with some bulletin that this minor rainy season is going to be heavy. There are going to be showers, a lot of rains, and I think that is what we are expecting. We are in a minor rainy season, and at certain times, based upon some of the phenomena that we are having, the El Nino La Nina issues, there is a possibility that we'll have a lot of rains in the minor rainy season in some areas.
Potofi further indicated the heavy rains will be across the country and are expected to cease in the national capital by December and October in the northern part of the country.
Currently, as I'm speaking, it's raining in part of the northern region heavily. And usually, this is a period where it should have dropped down to the coastal and the middle areas. It's still raining in the north. In Accra, it will end somewhere in November. October, November, it will October ending, it will end in the north. But within Accra, at certain times, maybe within December, we can have some rain.
Meanwhile, the National Disaster Management Organization, NADMO, has urged the public to remain vigilant in the face of the forecasted heavy rains. Reporting for NewsLink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I am Atiewin Imbila Lawson in Accra.
And to health matters, the United Nations Health Agency is calling for a ban on smoking and vaping in schools to protect young people. The World Health Organization, WHO, says young people remain the target of the tobacco industry, with 9 out of 10 smokers starting before the age of 18. WHO revealed these findings in a new guide released on Tuesday aimed at protecting children's health as the school year begins in many countries across the world.
This is the newspaper review. Stay on top of the news. Get the most important stories with added insight and concise review.
This is the newspaper review.
Let's turn to our Banjul correspondent, Sankule Janko, once again for highlights of major headlines from the national dailies.
Welcome to this edition of the press review. Let's start with the Standard newspaper. The Standard newspaper's lead story reads, Al-Kalolu asked to stop collecting land transaction charges. Al-Kalolu is head of a village. Friends of Cuba in Gambia condemn attack against Cuban embassy in U.S. P.H. Nyagado advises officials to be transparent with public resources. Let's move on to The Voice newspaper. The lead story on The Voice newspaper reads, Nam Sise hints student loan scheme not yet practicable. Madi Sise says anti-corruption bill diluted. Madi Sise is the chair of the Human Rights Committee at the National Assembly of the Gambia. Action Aid International Gambia spends over 180 million in 2022. Over 300 patients screened through Dr. Eric Yushi's health initiative. Let's move on to the Citizens newspaper. And the lead story on the Citizens newspaper reads, lack of tobacco law enforcement attracts more consumers. Commission reveals over 3 months of unpaid salaries at Basse Area Council. And this one reads, report reveals 17 million unaccounted for in GPA $400 million saga. Let's move on to the Fourier newspaper. The lead story on the Fourier newspaper reads, in Basse Area Council, procurement done by anyone, especially finance unit, says the procurement officer. GPU validates simplified draft access to information handbook. Gambia aligns its national strategic plan to end TB by 2030. This other one reads, India trains 30 senior officials on public policy and governance. NHRC validates draft advisory note on right to food. And finally, government launches SOE Commission. These are the major stories making headlines on Gambian dailies, and it's back to you in the studio.
Many thanks, Sankule Janko.
Politics,
analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
On the guest interview segment this afternoon is a Senegalese political analyst and NewsLink contributor Mamadou Cho. In this brief chat, he shares his expectations from the just-launched citizen sponsorship campaign to validate the candidacies of presidential aspirants as the country begins to count down to the February 2024 presidential polls. According to Mamadou Cho, amendments made to the Senegalese electoral codes will make for major changes this season.
I think most Senegalese welcome this process of selecting the candidate who want to run for the presidency, because you saying that more than 70% declare so far that they want to run, it's unbelievable to allow all these people, no matter what happened, we are all equal. But I mean, it's you have to to have a process to select like primaries and then select maybe the better among them, or using the citizen sponsorship. And the big change this year is, this sponsorship can be done by the members of the parliament. If you have 13 MPs, you can be a candidate, or you can have mayors, more than 100 mayors, and what we call those who are at the head of the departments. So at least 5 years ago, people were stunned to see that of the 30 candidates, only 5 was selected after the citizen sponsorship. I think this year we can do far more better to have something like more than 10 candidates.
Well, Mr. Mamadou Chow, following the recent electoral review done after the national dialogue organized by the president, Macky Sall, which of the camps do you think this sponsorship campaign would favor the most?
When you look at the different forces, I mean, you're talking about Benabok Yakar. I mean, there's no doubt they can make it. Yewi as country is good for them. Even Halifa, who is at Dagar's drone with Yewi, his friends from Yewi as country, can make it. So, yeah, I mean, the coalition represented at the National Assembly has no worry to make the case for this sponsorship. And that's why I think that maybe they could have said that if you choose, I mean, the process of getting sponsored by the National Assembly or by the MPs, you have no right to go for the citizen sponsorship. Because what will happen, those who are in PASTEF announced that they want 2 million citizen sponsorship, and Benabok Yaka won, the same number or even more than that. It means, if they succeed in getting this number, they will prevent others, maybe the small candidate, to try to make their case. They maybe succeed in getting sponsored, because in getting 2 million here for these two coalitions, and Benabok Yaka and Yewi Askanwi, it comes to 4 million.
Mamadou Chow is a Senegalese political analyst. And in the world of sport, Nigeria Football Federation (NFF) has announced an international friendly match with Mozambique in October. The match is part of Super Eagles' preparations ahead of their World Cup qualifiers. Elsewhere, Senegal has secured their place in the second round of CAF Women's Africa Cup of Nations Morocco 2024 qualifiers after a hard-fought 2-1 away victory over Mozambique to advance to the next round of qualifiers, winning 3-2 on aggregate. And Ghana completed double over Rwanda after a 5-0 win at Accra Stadium on Tuesday to advance to the next round of Women's Africa Cup of Nations. Ghana won 12-0 on aggregate following their 7-0 thrashing of Rwanda in the first leg. And with that, we've come to the end of this edition of NewsLink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Iyaz Bilumu and Mustafa Sek for the technical support. Do interact with us via social media platforms, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram at WADR News, on Facebook, West Africa Democracy Radio English Service, and stream live on wadr.org. I'm Abdullahi Hassan. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to NewsLink via Hot 104.3 FM, Newmi FM 94.0, and Veritas Radio 102.9 in Banjul, the Gambia. We also appreciate our listeners in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County. For you listening via Radio Pad 95.1 Damango, Savannah region, and on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi, Ghana, we say a big thank you. Remember, West Africa Democracy Radio is all about you, your views, and